Okay, here we go. We are now live. Welcome, welcome everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is Deyvanshi Masrani. I'm with Haute Living, and I'm very excited to be here, be back, and be here today to discuss something very important. I'm here with three esteemed panelists and one very esteemed moderator, Vanessa Conlin from Wine Access, of course. Thank you, Wine Access, as always, for joining us and speaking with us about these really important topics. So before we begin on our IWCA panel, I would like to introduce each panelist individually, starting first and foremost with Beth. Thank you, Beth, for joining us, first of all.
Thank you for having me.
So I'm going to read everyone's bios very quickly as I can, I promise. And then we will jump right into some questions with Vanessa. So without further ado, in 1987, Beth joined her mother, Mary Novak, becoming the first second-generation family member to become, actively involved in guiding Spotswood Estate, Vineyard, and Winery. In the more than 3 decades since, Beth has played a key role in establishing Spotswood Estate Vineyard as one of the world's great wine growing sites, and Spotswood as one of Napa Valley's most iconic and respected wineries. She has also quietly built a reputation as a leader in the Napa Valley community, advocating on behalf of the wine industry and the social and environmental causes she holds dear. Moving to Napa Valley with her parents in 1972, Beth grew up surrounded by the vineyards. Like her 4 siblings, Beth's chores included tasks like suckering the vines and cleaning out the emitters. While her youth in Napa Valley may have planted the seed for her future, ironically, it was just a year spent studying abroad in Europe that made her begin thinking about a career in wine. After earning a degree in economics from UCLA, Beth joined San Francisco-based wine brokerage representing clients like Caymus, Joseph Phelps, and Pine Ridge. When Mary asked Beth to help out a little on the winery, it didn't take long for a few days to become a permanent way of life. One of Beth's first major decisions was to acquire the historic adjacent craft property to expand the estate and establish a barrel room and offices in its beautiful buildings. Since then, Beth has played an integral role in the thoughtful evolution of Spotswood. During her tenure, Beth has overseen the replanting of the estate in response to, I apologize in advance for this word, phylloxera, the
Well
vineyard
done.
the vineyard's pioneering CCOF organic certification in 1992 and the building of Spotswood Estate Winery in 1999. In addition, Beth has been a strong and effective voice for the Napa Valley wine community. Reflecting the high regard she's held in by her peers, in 1998, Beth was elected the youngest president of the Napa Valley Vintners, becoming the first woman to hold the position. Very cool, by the way. A believer in leading by example, Beth and Mary worked with 4 women winemakers in a row at Spotswood before promoting current winemaker Aaron Weinkoff. Beth also spearheaded the restoration of Spring Creek, which defines the southern boundary of the estate vineyard. In 2010, Beth and Mary were honorary chairs of Auction Napa Valley, a hugely successful event that raised more than $8.5 million for Napa Valley nonprofits. And in 2007, Spotswood joined the 1% for the Planet, donating 1% of Spotswood's gross revenues each year to nonprofits that support a healthier world. Above all else, Beth sees herself as a steward for her family's wine-growing estate, carrying on the legacy begun by Mary, who passed away in 2016. Welcome again. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Next up, Haley Duncan. Haley is a 3rd-generation vintner from Silver Oak and Toomey Cellars. Haley's grandfather, Ray Duncan, co-founded Silver Oak in the early 70s, and her father, Tim Duncan, has worked at the wineries for over 30 years. After graduating from Skidmore College in 2013 with a degree in environmental studies, Haley moved back to California to learn the family business firsthand, working in the vineyards, cellars, and customer service department. She then became project manager for construction of the new Alexander Valley Winery in Healdsburg, specializing in sustainability. Haley has applied her studies to help achieve the first LEED Platinum and Living Building Challenge certifications for new construction in the wine business. During construction of the new winery, she also led sustainability initiatives at Silver Oak's Oakville Winery, which became the first existing building certified LEED Platinum in July 2016. Welcome, Haley. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm on mute.
Yeah. Thanks for being here, Haley. Katie Jackson, the firstborn daughter of California wine pioneers Jess Jackson and Barbara Bank. Katie Jackson is a second-generation proprietor working to keep her family-run business at the forefront of quality and stewardship. Katie actively promotes the Jackson family's belief that environmental stewardship and social responsibility are essential to building family business that will endure for generations. Since stepping into her first winery role in the cellar at Stone Street Estate Vineyards, Katie has continued to build on her family's winemaking heritage. Today, Katie serves as Senior Vice President of Corporate Social Responsibility for Jackson Family Wines, a position that is equal parts sustainability and advocacy. Katie launched the company's first sustainability report in 2016 to highlight its decades-long sustainability journey and establish comprehensive goals, and is currently spearheading the development of the company's new resiliency plan launching this year. Under Katie's leadership, Jackson Family Wines has declared a commitment to become climate positive by 2050, built the U.S. wine industry's largest generation of on-site solar energy, and reduced its water use intensity by 48%. Katie continues to advance water security and innovative energy management while also working to adopt regenerative farming practices. Most recently, Katie led Jackson Family Wines in co-founding the International Wineries for Climate Action with Familia Torres of Spain. IWCA's mission is to decarbonize the global wine industry with goals to achieve 80% reduction by 2050. As the Jackson family's principal voice in promoting sustainable agriculture programs, Katie ensures that the family's vineyards throughout California and Oregon are certified sustainable. Additionally, Katie co-manages the Government Relations and External Affairs Department working on critical regulatory relations issues and directs charitable donations for the company's community outreach program. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. And last but certainly not least, I of course want to introduce our esteemed moderator, like I said, Vanessa Conlin of Wine Access, who was head of sales and marketing for several of Napa's most prestigious estates, including Arietta Wines, Dana Estates, and Realm Cellars. Previously, she was a retail buyer and wine bar wine director in New York. She's president of the board for the Jameson Animal Rescue Ranch, holds the Wine and Spirits Education Trust, or WeSet diploma, and was the recipient of the Nikki Singer Memorial Scholarship from the International Wine Center. Vanessa became the 52nd Master of Wine in the United States in February of last year. Welcome, Vanessa.
Thank you, Deyvanshi.
My pleasure. So I'm out of breath, so I pass it along to Vanessa to begin this very exciting Q&A. But just before doing that, I want to encourage everybody who's joining us here today. First of all, thank you for your time. I invite you to definitely be active in the chat and the Q&A that we have going here. Be happy to answer as many questions as we can in the allotted time. This is a very special panel, like I said, so take advantage and ask the questions that you want to ask. So over to you, Vanessa.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Deyvanshi and Haute Living, to this outstanding panel, and of course to everyone watching. And as Deyvanshi said, please use the chat to ask questions or the Q&A, and we'll answer as many as we can. But Katie, it just seems logical to start with you as a founding member. So your family started the IWCA along with the Torres family in Spain. So walk us through how that collaboration happened.
So we've known the Torres family for quite some time, and this collaboration was really, the idea came from Miguel Torres, and was something that he had been wanting to do for a long time, which was to establish an organization that was international in scope to set ambitious goals for climate action in the wine industry globally. And so his niece, Cristina Torres, actually was interning with us for about a year, and she was working with our sustainability team. And after learning a little bit more about some of the things that we were doing to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions footprint and just focus on sustainability in general, she told her family that she thought we could be a good partner to launch this effort. So the Torres family reached out to us and asked us if we would be willing to found this organization, and we were honored to do that. I think that the thing that we both have in common is the belief that climate change is real, and it's very important to take responsibility and address it as best we can for our sector. And we were very excited about the idea that by collaborating, we could create a platform for wineries who were similarly concerned about climate to work together to help the entire industry decarbonize. So that's essentially how it started. And since then, we have 10 members. We're so thrilled to have incredible members like Spotswood and Silver Oak and others around the globe. So I'm not sure if I answered your entire question, but.
You absolutely. And but if I may stick with you just for one moment, Katie. So talking about climate and the work that you're doing for consumers or people like me who actually probably don't know all of the different contributing factors. What aspects of the wine industry have the biggest carbon footprint?
So we've been doing an analysis every year, an inventory of our own footprint. And what we found is it's about 20% scopes 1 and 2. So those are direct emissions. Scope 1 is all the emissions that are associated with our business operations. And scope 2 is associated with the electricity that we purchase, the emissions that are created in producing that. But 80% of that, of our footprint is really having to do with things that we don't have direct control over. So it's everything from our packaging and everything upstream and downstream of us to transportation, to employee commutes, business travel, all of those things factor into that. So it's interesting because it's a challenge because so much of it is out of our direct control, but it offers a great opportunity for collaboration to work with our vendors and other industry partners to try to come up with solutions for that.
And Beth, I have a question I'd love to direct to you, which is, do you think that consumers care about sustainability, and why should they?
My hope, I think consumers are starting to care about sustainability. I think, and why should they? The question to me is so obvious. I mean, why do we sitting here care so much about it? Why does Jackson family, why does Silver Oak, why do we care so much about it? Because we are 3 multi-generational family winery businesses, and we want to carry our businesses forward to future generations, and we are agriculturally based. So we are uniquely cognizant of the impact that climate change is having on everything that we do, correct? On farming, on water, on whether it's fire, whether it's wind, whether it's a drought, which we're in right now. So we're very aware of this, and we're dealing with it on a day-to-day basis. We feel it as farmers. And so consumers should care. I mean, if for a purely selfish reason, if you want to keep having incredible wine from around the world in bottles, you should care. But because we want to be able to continue to make incredible wines. But we should all care because this is one earth. We all live on it, and we all need to care deeply about its health and about its ability to sustain itself going forward. And we all need to be a part of that. We need to come together and be a part of that.
So you actually sort of led to my next question very organically, which is this multi-generational aspect. And it's in the mission statement, I believe, of the IWCA. If you can indulge me just for a moment, I'd like to read it, which is: the International Wineries for Climate Action is a collaborative organization of wineries around the globe that recognize climate change is the most significant threat facing the wine industry, focusing on a science-based approach to reducing carbon emissions within the wine industry. Each member within the IWCA holds themselves and each other accountable to build a cleaner, more resilient wine community for future generations. The IWCA was co-founded, as we discussed, by Familia Torres and Jackson Family Wines, 2 leading wineries with a multi-generational vision rooted in environmental stewardship. So to go back to this sort of multi-generational, you're all part of multi-generational businesses. So how much of that factored into your decision to be part of this organization? And Haley, I'd love to direct this question to you.
Yeah, I think it's a huge factor in considering joining something like this. For us, we're on the 4th generation with my nephew, so he was just born 6 months ago. So we think about this all the time. It's in our own sustainability statement that we need to consider the next generation, and everything that we do should not inhibit, how they enjoy the natural resources after us. So I think when Katie came to me a couple years ago with this idea and the proposal of us joining, I think the first thing that comes to mind is, thinking about the next generation and why would we do this? It's because we want this business to be around for the 4th, 5th, 6th, next generations.
So I imagine then probably so many decisions from big to small every day are guided by this sort of shared principle. And Haley, sticking with you for a moment, can you describe some of the decisions that you've had to make to be part of a membership of this organization, and how has that sort of impacted your day-to-day business?
Yeah, so I'd say, we're at the very beginning stages of being a part of IWCA. We are technically still an applicant, which means we've gone through the auditing process, but we haven't demonstrated that 25% base reduction yet. So we've just done 1 year of auditing, which was 2020, it was 2019, and then 2020 came, and it just really changed all of our priorities, unfortunately, for that year. I also work in safety, and so basically last year I was almost exclusively focused on how do we keep our workplaces safe. Now, thankfully, we are kind of refocusing, and we're getting ready to do our next audit for 2020 and getting an internal group together to really think about some strategies that we can implement to reduce our emissions. I would say just generally, we've done a lot of things already that contribute to lowering our emissions. We have solar panels on many of our facilities. We buy green power from our local community choice programs, a set of PG&E, so we can actually have access to 100% local solar and wind power, which is amazing. We've eliminated a lot of fuel consuming equipment. So, we have electric forklifts, we have solar thermal heaters for hot water. We're not relying so heavily on propane. We've added composting programs for our employees so that we're reducing our waste to landfill, which also has an effect on emissions. And we're also looking at refrigerants that have no global warming potential, because we know a lot of refrigerants in use today, when they leak, they have a really harmful effect on global warming and the ozone. But looking into different refrigerants like ammonia has a huge effect on reducing our emissions.
Got it. And so, and Haley, thank you. You mentioned that you're an applicant, as is Beth Spotswood. So Beth, maybe you could take this next question. Then, how do you go about moving to the next level to actually being a member?
So that's going to be the challenge for a winery our size, but we're committed and determined to do it. We've had our GHG emissions measured for both 18 and 19. We will be measuring them for 2020 very soon. Of course, they will come down because we didn't, for us and with our size, our primary emissions come from the shipping of our wine direct to consumer. And we are coming up with better ways to do that so that we don't have to do as much air freight, because obviously shipping a case of wine via air is very, very, it's not good. There are a lot of emissions associated with that. And the other is business travel, and then some of the other things. And so obviously there was almost no business travel last year, but the shipping of wine was there. So we're really looking at that. I'm working closely with Julian Gavreau, who works with Katie, to try to arrive at, is there a way, what we're going to be looking at that as soon as we can compare 18 to 19, which we now can do, and then to 20. And then we'll say, well, what are those things that we can do to get 25% down? Because like Haley said, even before we ever got to be part of this process, I mean, we put solar on our buildings here in 2007. We've been changing out equipment to get more efficient equipment all the way across the board for the last 15 years. We have bought processing equipment that is easier to clean and uses a lot less water. So a lot of these things were in place before this ever came up. And then now when we get the measured, we're already measuring at a relatively low level, but we can always do more, and we're going to make it. I mean, we're determined to do it. We're just going to figure out how.
And Beth, if I recall, I think you were sort of an early adopter of organic farming. I want to say your certification came in 1992, if that's correct.
Yeah, and we started farming organically in 1985, thanks to Tony Soder, who was our founding winemaker and who had a belief in that.
So how did other vintners react to that decision? And do you think that that influenced other wineries to be organic?
So your question is a good one. I feel as if, and I don't have the data to back this up, and I've tried to find it and haven't really been able to. I think initially, yes, I think there was a move toward organics by more people. And then I think sort of Napa Green certification came along, and that was a little bit easier in a sense to achieve, if you will. And so I think some people thought, well, do I really want to go through the rigor of organics, as it were, if I can be Napa Green, and which is more or less sustainable, which is also a great move. We want everybody to be thinking about the natural environment and how their farming practices impact it. But I'm not sure, you know, if we were to look at sort of a record of how many certified organic vineyards are there, I don't know that the number of acres has increased as much as I would like. It's a commitment, and you have to be willing to do what it takes to farm organically. We also have, I mean, we're one 45-acre property, 40-acre vineyard here, and we've been doing this since 1985. We are encouraging the growers with whom we work on our Sauvignon Blanc to buy some Sauvignon Blanc, and then also Cabernet Sauvignon for our Lindenhurst program. We are encouraging them and incentivizing them to go organic, and many of them are.
Got it. Katie, if I could go back to you for a moment. Well, first of all, I wanted to say congratulations, because Wine Enthusiasts named the IWCA Social Visionary of the Year. Yeah. So how much did this raise awareness, and did you get a lot of other wineries reaching out to you after that, asking, you know, how to be a part of this?
It did. Yes. So we did get a lot of initial further interest. And I think at this point, we're really trying to figure out, because the requirements for IWCA are pretty rigorous, and intentionally so. We really want to make sure that people who are joining are very serious about their commitments. But we've had a lot of smaller wineries who are interested in joining, having a harder time kind of grappling with how they kind of do that. And so so we've been in the process of developing a calculator for greenhouse gas emissions internally as our organization that would make it easier for people to do their inventory. And we've kind of been focusing on that. And then we're also trying to increase our bandwidth a little bit in terms of bringing in new members, because right now it's a very small team that's working on it. We've got a couple people at Jackson and a couple people at Torres who are kind of doing that part-time. So we have had a lot of interest. We're trying to get in communication with everybody and help them along the process. And we're excited to do that. So hopefully we'll have some good tools to bring in more members soon.
Yeah. Well, congratulations again. That's quite an achievement and recognition, and well-deserved. Beth, I'd love to actually go back to you for a moment, because if I recall correctly, you have a degree in economics. So I felt you'd be a good one to take this question, which is there a long-term, aside from what we've talked about in terms of, you know, the earth sustainability, like, is there an economic advantage to a winery to invest in sustainability? And if so, how long does it actually take to see a return on investment?
So there's so many different initiatives that you can take that it would be, you know, if you think about the installation of solar panels and how long does that take to get, you know, your money back on that in lower energy. And I think it's something like, Haley, you could probably help me better here. Is it sort of 5 to 7 years?
I think it depends. I think it's more in like the 10 to 15 range, but I think for every project, it's a little different.
Okay. So there's just so many aspects, right? Or buying different equipment so that you use less water, or upgrading your, you know, mechanical things in your mechanical room so that you're using less electricity. And less water. We try to let all of our equipment sort of find to the end of its more or less its shelf life before we replace it, because otherwise you're throwing out something that's perfectly usable. And that there's a waste to that, right? Obviously, everything that humans do, we do create waste in some form. So it's very difficult to sort of, for me, long-term, the way that we're looking at it, because everything in the wine business is long-term. We're growing grapes that take a long time to come up. We're producing wines that take, 3 years to get to market. And so it's thinking long-term and sort of what are we gaining in terms of how good we feel about what we're doing, about being a business. I mean, we just achieved B Corp certification, which we're really excited about. We're the first in Napa Valley to have gotten that. So we're really looking at how do we keep pushing that envelope of just using our business as a platform for good, because and it gives us sort of that it just gives the whole team, and I have a great team here, just a great feeling about being a part of something that is looking, we're not just growing grapes and making wine. We hope that Spotswood is a platform to bring about change. Like Yvon Chouinard, I always view truly as my hero from Patagonia. I love everything that they do and how they try to inspire and engage their audience to bring about positive change. And that's our hope too. And you can't monetize that, I think. So economics or not, we just look at it as something that is a long-term infrastructural sort of commitment, and it's part of our culture.
And Beth, if I could stay with you for a moment, I know as Deyvanshi read in your bio, you've been very involved also in the Napa Valley Vintners Association, including being a former chair of Auction Napa Valley with your mother. So I'm curious about other vintners in Napa Valley. Are they asking, what kind of questions do they ask you? And then what sort of advice are you giving them if they're interested in becoming a member of the IWCA?
So I'm chair of a newly formed committee called the Environmental Stewardship Committee. And through that group, what we're trying to do is bring about more environmental awareness and bring up tools. And we're going to be putting together a handful, 3 seminars this year on different aspects where people have a sense of, well, here's what I can actually do. Here's what I can contribute or actually make happen. And so in terms of IWCA, I really think, and Katie mentioned this already, we are, in fact, the 3 of us wineries on this are the ones funding this GHG emissions calculator via a man named Josh Prigge at Sustridge. And I think if we can provide that in some form, and Julian and I actually just today and yesterday have been going back and forth via email about that, if we can provide something that people have access to, because of course we can address what we can measure. And so if wineries start having a greater understanding of well, where are our emissions, then you can actually start taking action. And I would like to see us somehow make that available. We'd like to encourage people to join IWCA, but if they don't feel like they can make that type of a commitment, because there's not yet a membership, but there are costs to doing everything that you need to do to get there. It would be wonderful to me on a more altruistic and broader level to make sure that people can at least start measuring it and going, well, can I meet those goals? Great. And then I would love to join something. So it's sort of the chicken or the egg, right? I mean, which way do you go? But I'd love to see IWCA serve as a catalyst. And then I would love to be able to share information about it with the Napa Valley Vintner membership, of which is like 540 members.
Wow.
That's actually good to know, because we got a lot of questions coming in about how, how you guys are incentivizing other wineries to sort of join the cause in whatever way that they can. And, helping to build tools like this that they can use is incredible. But I don't mean to interrupt, but we're getting a lot of questions coming in. So if you don't mind, Vanessa, I'm just going to
absolutely
address a couple of them.
Yeah.
So sort of we talked, from a vintner or winery side of things, but in terms of consumers, I guess, Katie, will direct this to you. How can consumers contribute to the effort of IWCA? And is there some sort of logo or something to look for on certain bottles as hopefully more wineries become, members or applicants at least?
I guess there's a couple of different things that come to mind. To answer the last part of your question first, yes, we are working on putting together a logo that members can use to put on their wines, and it will show the percentage of reduction in emissions that they've accomplished since their baseline year. So that's kind of still in development, but we're hoping that we'll be able to provide that to members, and also that'll be a good way for consumers to know how to support IWCA. I think on a broader level, what customers can do to really support IWCA is just become really knowledgeable about climate and the importance of climate, and start talking about it, and start sharing your concerns with the wineries that you support, and learn about the wineries that you are interested in and their sustainability stories. And there are a lot of green wineries that are taking these issues seriously. At this time, we do list all of the applicant members and members of IWCA on our website, so people can go there too to learn a little bit more about who's already committing to these goals and taking action.
And Haley, going back to you, you went through some of the different ways that you guys are implementing different techniques and equipment and whatnot to make sure you're up to the IWCA standard in terms of your whatever audits you're doing, I guess year 2 now. Got a couple of questions on how these sort of different techniques actually impact the wine, if at all.
Yeah, I think a lot of people want to know that sustainability is affecting quality in a good way. And I would say a lot of the things that we have implemented have a positive effect on quality. Some of them I would say is more neutral, right? Like solar panels don't improve the quality of our wines, but they make great business sense. They have a reasonable return on our investment, and we're not relying so much on fossil fuels. So that's a good thing. I think one thing we can point to in terms of quality improvement would be the use of steam for swelling barrels and other activities to reduce our water usage. So it not only reduces our water usage, but it's a more effective sanitizer than hot water, which is good for the quality of our wines because cleanliness is everything in a winery. So I think there are definitely some things that you can correlate with quality, and other things I think are just sort of neutral.
Okay, Vanessa, I'll hand it back to you, and I'll come back with some more questions that I'm reading through here.
Okay, no, actually, Haley, you sort of hinted at a question I wanted to ask you, which is about barrels, because unlike our other panelists, Silver Oak actually owns their own cooperage. So I'm curious, what are some of the ways that a cooperage can act more sustainably, and have you seen this make an impact for your winery?
I think right off the bat, just the fact that we source the majority of our barrels and all of our barrels for the Silver Oak wines within the US in Missouri makes a huge difference in terms of transportation costs. I mean, transportation emissions and costs probably. So just right there, we've been able to eliminate a lot of the transportation emissions, although it is a big part of our pie when you look at it. I don't think inherently our cooperage is a very wasteful business. They reuse everything that they can. They sell any scraps of wood and sawdust to other companies who reuse it. So just, by nature, we try to reduce waste as much as possible. I think when you get into like the forest management conversation, that's a really complex topic that I don't really have all the information to say that there isn't going to be a problem in 30 or 40 years. I truly don't know. I know right now there's, a more supply than there is demand for oak for different businesses, including the wine business. But I would say at the moment, that is definitely not the part of the business that I'm most concerned about. I think generally it operates very efficiently.
And while I have you, Haley, I know that both the Napa and the Alexander Silver Oak wineries are LEED Platinum certified, which is amazing. Congratulations. And you had a huge part in that. Can you refresh my memory? I remember visiting, of course, with your brother Matt, and you told me something about like recycled blue jeans in the walls. What was that all about?
Yeah, so the Alexander Valley facility is really an example of how far you can take sustainability on an operational winery side of the business. So we considered absolutely everything imaginable, even the insulation. So the blue jeans that he's referring to is the bat insulation that we used in the tasting room and the winery. It's a much better alternative to the pink fiberglass insulation that I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen, which, you know, you're not even supposed to touch with your bare hands. It's that toxic. So the blue jeans insulation is recycled denim. It's actually more energy efficient than fiberglass insulation. And it's literally just like cotton, and it's not toxic at all. So, you know, that to me, that's kind of an obvious thing to do. So if you can reduce the chemicals in your building materials, it's more energy efficient and it has a great story. You know, that to me is a win.
I love that. Thank you for clarifying. Deyvanshi, I do see there are still a number of questions coming in, so I'm sure we'd love to post some of them to the panelists. Oh, I think you're on mute, Deyvanshi. Oh, no.
I don't even know where to begin. There's so many coming
Yeah,
in.
Great questions too.
Yeah, how about this? How does the rest of the country and perhaps the rest of the world even, you know, where is everyone in terms of in the wine industry reacting to climate change and trying to become more sustainable? Perhaps Beth.
I've been on a number of things. I was just on a panel a couple of weeks ago with Porta Protocol, and it was great. I was on with a woman from southern France and another from Portugal. There is real awareness everywhere. And then when you look at sorry, Katie, but I'll say but the applicant members of IWCA, and the reason that we're all applicant members, by the way, is just because it's a relatively nascent group and we haven't had the opportunity yet to have enough years of data to get our global emissions down by 25%. But, you know, there's people in that group from all over. I mean, there's Spain, there's Chile, Portugal, obviously the US. Is there anybody from France, Katie? I can't remember. Haley, you can help.
Not yet. There's someone from New Zealand. Oh, we have a new Australian member.
That's right, Colin. Yep. Vanya Colin, yeah. So I would say around the world there's great awareness, and I remember even, you know, going back to just the beginning of this section here, what we're talking about. As I recall, it was Miguel Torres who saw An Inconvenient Truth in whatever year that was released by Al Gore. I'm so sorry, I can't remember the date, but he was really deeply touched and impacted by that and recognized that he needed to do something, and that was an impetus for him. So, you know, it feels as if, and I think in Europe, you know, with it being a relatively smaller, you know, overall place, and I think there's just greater awareness anyway. I mean, Europe has certainly always used less than we do here in the United States. We're pretty good at using a lot of things. It's just our nature. It's the way we've been raised. And so I feel like there's great awareness, and it is definitely worldwide. And I think all of us in the wine industry, to go back to what I said earlier, we feel it. We're farmers. This is agriculturally based. And so we're uniquely invested in addressing climate change.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear, of course. That's wonderful to know. And going a little bit back to when we were talking about consumers and consumers being educated about climate change affecting their wine, for those consumers who may not be as educated, sorry, I'm in quarantine right now, and it's sort of a makeshift office situation. My apologies. But in terms of, you know, potentially educating consumers that don't know as much about this and how important it is, Haley, maybe you can tell us a little bit about what we can potentially do moving forward to help people understand the impact that this is having on not just our wine, but our world.
Well, I think certifications are a great tool to communicate a winery's efforts because they can be put on the packaging And so there's a real visual that starts a conversation between wineries and the consumer. I also think that certifications like IWCA that have a good reputation should be supported, and more wineries should consider certification as opposed to adopting a few practices here and there. I just think that it carries more weight. And that's part of the reason why we decided to join the IWCA, is because the goals are so aspirational, and not a lot of people would commit to those goals. Well, hopefully more do, but I think that it's clear that it's not just an acknowledgement that climate change is happening and there's not much we can do, but it's actually, okay, let's get to work and let's figure out how we can reduce our company's effects on this issue. And I think consumers, just ask more questions when you can come out to California or wherever. If you're interested, ask the questions. I was giving tours pre-pandemic to consumers and trade and everyone else, and those tours were just focused on sustainability for those that are really, really interested in it. So we want to talk about it, and I think if consumers are interested in the concepts, then they just need to ask questions. Oh, you're on mute.
Now I'm on mute. I'm sorry. What sorts of questions should that consumer be asking potentially on these tours, or maybe virtually now, in order to get that information, Haley?
I mean, they can start anywhere, but I think if we're talking about greenhouse gas emissions, maybe it's just, how are you guys addressing, the issue of climate change, and how are you trying to reduce your company's effect on it? Because we all have an effect on it.
Great, thank you. Vanessa, I'll go back to you, and as I continue to read these questions.
Well, actually, there's a question in the chat from, I think it was Brian. There's so many great questions in here, which was a question I had. Beth, maybe you could take this one. The question is about planting different varieties in reaction to climate change. And is that something that you're considering doing, either planting different varieties or looking at different types of locations for vineyards?
So a bit of both, but we are St. Helena, Napa Valley based at this moment. We have indeed planted an experimental vineyard. We planted it, we budded it in 2019, I believe. And what we're doing is, and it's right adjacent to our vineyard. It's a vineyard that we have a long-term lease on. And what we're doing is trying to get a sense of what we think will be growing well here as things are. So what does climate change mean here? At least as far as what we've seen, of course, is more heat, more dryness, obviously fires and other issues. We feel that Cabernet Sauvignon has a very long life here. It's a party grape, and it is thick-skinned, and Cabernet seems to be able to withstand sort of different extremes that Mother Nature places upon it quite well. We blend our Cabernet Sauvignon with both Cabernet Franc and Petit Verdot. Those may or may not have that same resilience that Cabernet Sauvignon has. So we are already testing other varietals simply to see how they're going to do here. Do they hold their color? Can they ripen at the right time? And what can they contribute? So it's something that we're just working on. We have about an acre planted to these alternative varietals, and we're really just going to keep a really close eye on them and share obviously information with anybody that's interested. So it's not proprietary. We really want to just do this because we think it's really important, and we want Napa Valley to remain strong and to be a part of that.
Beth, just one more question for you, and this is sort of the a follow-up to Deyvanshi's question to Haley about sort of the questions that consumers should be asking. Do you think that there is one sort of misconception among consumers about sustainability that you wish you could clear up?
That might have existed historically. I mean, and Katie and Haley, you can help me speak to this as well. I think there was a time when sort of organic wine, there was a sense of, we love to buy organic fruit. We love to buy organic vegetables, but there was kind of a question as to organic wine, and organic wine can be tricky. I mean, Spotswood is a certified organic vineyard. Our Cabernet Sauvignon, our wines are not certified organic. Our winery is not certified organic because there's very strange rules around that, even though everything we do really is organic. So I think that would be the one misconception, is that we want it, and we want to, again, lead by example or prove by example that being good to the environment and being good stewards of our land is absolutely 100% compatible with great wines.
Got it.
Yeah,
Deyvanshi, I see more questions, so back to you.
Let
Oh,
me,
sorry. Please.
sorry, Katie, were you saying something?
Oh, I was just, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry,
Katie.
go ahead, Haley.
I was just going to agree with what Beth was saying. And I think there are still misconceptions even today about what sustainable wines are. It's a very broad term. And I think for the most part, consumers still consider green wines to be organic wines. So I think there's still a lot of education that needs to happen to explain better what sustainable wines are, you know, what's going on in the vineyard, what's going on in the cellar, and that it's not just a very narrow focus on organic. So that would be just the one thing that I think, you know, we as an industry can work on educating consumers on.
I would agree with that. And I also would agree with Beth's statement that environmentally friendly practices are often tied to better quality. And I think what we've seen as an organization is that just by paying closer attention to our entire environmental footprint, we are paying more attention to how we're growing our wines and how we're making our wines as well. And that really translates to better quality often. So so I would just reiterate that tie between quality and sustainability in our case, or in Beth's case, or organic, I think is very real.
Great. And this is a question that came up actually, and I don't know if it, maybe I'm not educated, I'm definitely not educated enough, let me say that, on regenerative agriculture, and if that's something that pertains to wineries, and if that's something that, you know, is part of IWCA, or if anyone is actively doing that. Katie, I'll give that one to you.
Yes, so we, I can speak to what we're doing first, and then what IWCA is doing. We've been looking at regenerative agriculture and how it can pertain to wine growing for the last 4 or 5 years. And we have a trial on one of our sites that is partially funded by the California Department of Food and Agriculture. And the state of California is really starting to put a lot of funding and support behind the scaling of regenerative agriculture in California, which is great. We're really excited about it because we think it could be a potential way for wineries to offset their carbon emissions. And we don't think that we can reach our climate positive goal ultimately by 2050 without some sort of land use or carbon farming component. So IWCA has started a working group, and we have members all participating and trying to learn from each other, do some research, and figure out how we can start deploying regenerative agriculture in our wineries, and also how we can wrap it into the International Wineries for Climate Action mission going forward. And that work has just started. So hopefully we'll have a lot more to talk about in a year from now. And I don't know if Haley or Beth want to jump in as well.
Yeah, I think it's an area that needs to be studied a lot more. You know, what is the capacity of soil to sequester carbon on a long-term basis? And I think that's one of the reasons why IWCA hasn't included that practice in mitigation or recognizing that as a mitigation, because there's still a lot going on with the science. Soil sciences are complex. Every vineyard has different capacities for sequestering carbon, and the way that you account for that is it varies. So there isn't one approach, right, to accounting for this. So I think there's still a lot to be learned about it. We also participated in a carbon farming study in one of our vineyards in the Alexander Valley. I think I actually have a meeting tomorrow to review the results because I don't understand it. It's very complicated. But I agree with Katie that we're hoping that the science continues and that it does show that vineyards have the capacity to do this. And again, the ways that we're going to achieve climate positive, we need to be thinking outside the box a little bit and, we can only reduce so much. We're always going to have some effect on the greenhouse gases.
Beth is nodding in agreement. Yes.
I am.
Katie, in addition to, we talked a little bit about the calculator that, the three of you here are helping to incentivize, other wineries to, join IWCA and the overall bigger impact that it has on the wine world and the world as a whole. What other sort of incentives, if any, do you have to sort of help other growers potentially go in that direction as well? Maybe, different levels of IWCA in the future, perhaps, or anything like that in the works?
So I think the calculator's the number one item. And then right now our dues are very low. We're trying to keep them low so we can hopefully make it easier to join. I think the fact that it is a platform for collaboration and sharing learnings confidentially, if people want it to be amongst members, is something that we think could be a huge benefit. And then we are looking at that logo for labels as something that can help IWCA members really take what they're doing, all of the great things they're doing, and market better to consumers. So those are the main things at this point.
Great. And before I give it back to Vanessa, I have to ask this very funny question that just came in, which is this a women's only society? It happened to work out that way today, but I don't want to speak on behalf of IWCA, but I do not believe it is closed off to men or any gender, any way that you identify yourself. So hopefully that won't deter anyone from potentially being a member. Vanessa, to you.
So not to get too nerdy, but let's go there. Beth, maybe you could take this one. So fermentation itself is carbon positive. So what are some things that a winery can actually do to offset this?
Well, I am going to take that one and, like on a basketball court, pass it right on to Haley, because Haley does a lot of work with us, and we have visited her winery up in Alexander Valley and had a wonderful tour with David and Haley. And you are doing something where you're trying to capture it, but finding a use for it, I believe, is the challenge. And so Haley is the expert here. So Haley, back to you.
Haley.
Sure, yeah. So just full disclosure, we don't have a way to actually reuse the CO2 that's basically waste CO2 during fermentation, but we have all the infrastructure in place in our Alexander Valley facility to capture it once we have a technology that we can invest in that makes sense for us. And I think, part of the problem is that we could compress it and purify it and reuse it, but that's not sequestering it. That's putting it back out into the atmosphere as soon as we use it. And so we need to look at technologies that actually permanently sequester the CO2 and not focus on it as a purely, reuse of a waste product. So I think there are technologies out there to turn the CO2 into chalk. I, am not really knowledgeable about how that works. I believe Torres has invested in some of this technology. Katie can correct me if I'm wrong. But I think it's still not mainstream for wineries to do this. I think part of it is financially. It doesn't quite make sense financially. What do we do with it all? And then finally for us, it makes up less than 5% of our company's emissions. So does it make sense to put a lot of monetary investment towards something that really doesn't move the needle for us? So that's something that we struggle with.
Yeah, and Haley's absolutely correct. I think Torres is doing a lot of research into this, and also UC Davis is doing some research, but I don't know that there is a technology yet that is cost effective and scalable in a way that we would want it to be accessible for the whole industry. And we have been looking at this ourselves as well. But to Haley's last point, I think we found that the sequestration associated with our vines evens out to the emissions from our fermentation. So at this point, it isn't a big enough piece of the pie for us to really focus a lot of energy on. But hopefully down the line, there will be some interesting technologies that will be helpful.
Well, I know that we're getting close to time, and there are still several questions from attendees, which I want to be sure that we cover. So Deyvanshi, I'm also going to pass this like a basketball player back to you to see if there's some questions here that we want to pose to the panelists.
Sure. There is one that came in that might be, you know, obviously we're in Napa, talking Napa right now, but piggybacking off the earlier question about looking at planting different varietals, are there any sort of conversations about, you know, potentially looking at different locations with various climates for future expansion based on sort of the climate change issue that we're facing today? We'll give that to you, Beth.
So we have been looking, again, all of our eggs, I mean, it was for a period of time that having your eggs in the St. Helena Napa Valley sort of alluvial bench basket was great, right? At this point, I mean, we're cognizant that we would like the opportunity to buy land in a cooler area, knowing that over time we'd like to have the opportunity to see what we could do with that. And so we have a plan around that. We're patient. We haven't yet found anything that is going to fit our needs, but we would certainly like to buy in another area as well. For us, just based upon our size, I mean, I know, you know, the Jackson family, you're great. You're so diversified from Southern California up to Northern California to Oregon. For us to be able to do that right now, we don't have that capacity to go that far. We're a much smaller company, but our hope would be to stay within an hour and a half or 2 hours of where we are. Obviously, that would mean sort of Sonoma, Western Sonoma, or possibly Anderson Valley, looking toward cooler areas. And if we could find something, we would love to get in and do that. I think it's going to be important to have some geographic diversity as well as sort of what you're planting in your vineyard. So that's something that we are considering.
And Haley, I think I heard correctly when you said you had referenced something from a sustainability tour that you offered at Silver Oak. So so obviously you do tours on site for just relating to sustainability, but do you sort of incorporate sustainability into your on-site wine tasting experiences or tours, or is that just, okay, so you do. Someone actually asked that specifically, if sustainability is part of the experience for everyone who comes to visit.
Yes, especially in the Alexander Valley. All of our tasting room staff are trained on our sustainability features. We have an eco screen that can show the solar panels production for the day, our recycled water use. So we have all of those things available. The tours that I do are just a much deeper dive into sustainability. People who are really interested in the topic and, you know, want to walk around with me for 3 hours because it takes that long. But for somebody who's just coming in for a regular tasting, yes, it's totally incorporated into our experience.
Great. And Katie, is IWCA actually actively reaching out to other wineries to sort of join? Yes, okay, so it's growing.
Yes, we've been doing a lot of outreach, and I think we've had about 75 wineries that we've been in conversations with so far. So we are working on growing, and we actually just set a goal of hopefully reaching 30 members by the end of this year. So we're actively planning to figure out how to do that, and that would be great because that will get us more towards that. I think the ideal number that Torres and we thought we should reach at a minimum was 50 to kind of have the critical mass to really start making an impact.
Great. And as we wrap up here, I want to ask a question. It actually wasn't a question that came in from somebody who's watching, but it seems that most of our attendees today are more on the consumer side. So I wanted to ask each of you if you had anything sort of in our final words here of what you'd like to, tell everybody about why IWCA, why buy your wines that are IWCA certified. Hopefully we'll see that logo soon on the bottles, why it's important to be a part of this. Haley, we'll start with you.
Sure. I mean, IWCA is really the only organization in the wine industry that is addressing this problem with that level of commitment. So I think that's part of the reason why it's received so much recognition over the past couple of years, is that it's very unique in its mission. The goals are incredibly difficult to achieve. Being climate positive and by 2050 is going to be really, really hard for all of us to do. I honestly don't know that path is clear for us yet, but I think just the fact that it's so unique and so strong and aspirational is, reason enough for consumers to be interested in it and ask questions about it. And I hope that more and more wineries join and we reduce the barriers to entry as much as we can, reduce the cost, and bring more wineries on board.
Wonderful. Beth.
Haley really said it all beautifully. I really don't know what I can add to what she said. I think measuring and certifying is really important, and I'm glad that the standards are rigorous because I think they should be, because then it's truly meaningful when you get it. And I think that IWCA, by bringing in more members, also my goal, and I believe that of the IWCA, in fact, I know it's that, is to inspire change in others and to make it so that people say, that's just really something I want to be a part of, and I can do that, and I can see how I can do that. And again, it's a relatively nascent group. I mean, it's relatively new, and so it is ambitious. The plans are ambitious, which I also really admire, Katie, for you and the Torres family to actually take this on. I have the greatest admiration for you, and that we have the opportunity, Spotswood, and I'm sure Haley feels the same way, although I can't speak for her, but to be a part of being an applicant member and being among the first to sort of tuck in behind and do this is wonderful. And I love that it is ambitious and that we can get more people on board. Again, it goes back to we are agriculturally based, multi-generational family businesses, and we really want to see climate action, and that is the name.
Wonderful. And to Katie, if any final words on this.
Haley and Beth said it really beautifully, and I guess the only thing I'd add is this is a really proactive organization, and I think we feel a great sense of hope in the fact that we're able to actually take something that has been a challenge for wineries globally and really start to find an opportunity to address it in a meaningful way. And being able to model that for other industries, I think is a key part of IWC as well. We'd love for this to be successful and to show other industries that it is possible to have these collaborative organizations that can come together and make meaningful change. So that's one other reason that I'm really proud of this organization and really excited to be working with our members.
So well said. And as they say, nothing that is worth it isn't difficult. So we're really pleased to, at least help spread the word a little bit. I want to give it to Vanessa before we close for your final thoughts. And by the way, all of these ladies' beautiful wines are available at Wine Access. So I'm sure Vanessa will speak a little bit on that as well. So any final words, Vanessa?
Oh, no, absolutely. I mean, proud to support these amazing wineries and what they're achieving here. And such a pleasure. Thank you and an honor. Thank you to Haute Living and Deyvanshi as always. I do have one last question. Katie, I wanted to end with you since we started with you as a founding member of the IWCA, which is, you've done such amazing work, through your family's wineries. for sustainability, for the environment. And I think as a result of that, you were justifiably named one of the 40 under 40 tastemakers in 2018 by Wine Enthusiast magazine. So that's quite an achievement already. So looking ahead to the next decade, what's the next big achievement going to be?
Well, thank you for mentioning that. I don't know that I really deserve that, but I think in my 40s, what I'd love to see is I would love to see us meaningfully find a way forward to decarbonizing the wine industry, and I think this is the vehicle to do it in, and the collaborative effort that will be helpful in achieving it. So,
well said. Well, thank you, and Deyvanshi.
Yeah,
Back
thank
to
you
you.
so much. This is so great. You know, I think it's so important to have discussions like this, you know, on a small scale and on a larger scale like this. So the more that we can do, the better. I already see requests for part 2. So that's wonderful. Maybe we can have an update in the coming months. But again, everyone's wines are available on Wine Access, so be sure to check that out. And of course, check out IWCAwine.org as well to learn more about this incredible, something incredible that we all can very easily be a part of as consumers. So on behalf of Haute Living and Wine Access, I want to thank you all, Haley, Katie, and Beth, for being here today with us. For everyone that took time out of their evening to join us, thank you so much. This was wonderful, and hopefully see you next time.
Yes,
Thank you so much.
you. And I
us.
did post a link, and there's a link in the chat to the wines if anyone's interested.
Yes.
So again, thanks so much, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
Bye.